John sat on the edge of the bed, the pale yellow envelope trembling slightly in his hand. The hospital light still echoed behind his eyelids even after leaving. He'd replayed the doctor's words at least 20 times during the walk home. Stage 4, aggressive. The phrase kept splitting through his brain like lightning, but oddly, no tears came, just numbness. He loosened his tie, barely aware that he was still in his office clothes. His fingers clumsily tore the envelope open again, as if by rereading the diagnosis, he might find some decimal error, some misprint, some kind of salvation. But the words stayed the same. Malignant adenocarcinoma, gastric wall invasion, limited months remaining. His hand curled around the paper, crushing it slowly into a wrinkled ball. It didn't feel real, not yet. Not until he told someone, not until his eyes caught it, on the glass table by the window, a soft lavender notebook, its pages slightly open, angled toward the evening light. Sophia's diary. He never touched her things, ever. But this time something about the way it was left out, as if the universe had placed it there like a trap. He stepped toward it. The air in the room felt thicker now. The curtain swayed softly, brushing against the edge of the table, flipping the pages wider. His name, he saw it, it was underlined in black ink. He paused, then leaned in. John is becoming less and less like Ryan. Should I just break up with him? His heart didn't drop, it detonated. The air left his lungs. A sharp buzzing filled his ears as the room tilted slightly off balance. He read the line again, then again, the way she wrote his name, and Ryan's, so casual, like comparing flavors, like he wasn't real, like he was just temporary. His mouth went dry, his legs suddenly felt heavy. He sank into the couch like someone had shot him from behind. His eyes scanned the sentence of 4 buddies. The time. 5th. The words refused to change. Ryan. Of course. He'd heard that name before, back when they first started dating. Just someone from the past, she'd said with a shrug. An old phase. A footnote in her history. John had never asked again. He trusted her. He rubbed his face, hoping to wake up, but the paper crumpled harder in his fist, scratching his palm. Less and less like Ryan. He looked down at his own reflection in the window, pale skin, hollow cheeks, faint shadows under his eyes from working overtime every night. For her, always for her, and still, it wasn't enough. His gaze drifted back to the diary, his fingers hovered above it, then gently brushed off the dust that wasn't even there, like maybe cleaning it would somehow erase the truth. He closed the cover softly, trembling, not from the cancer, but from the slow, vicious realization. He was never her love story. He was just the replacement. John had always known loss before he ever understood love. He was 3 when the car crash took everything, his mother's lullabies, his father's laughter, their little apartment with peeling wallpaper and a tiny red tricycle left out in the hallway. The funeral was a blur of strangers in black, weeping over a boy too young to understand what had been taken from him. All he remembered was gripping the hand of an old woman in a faded cardigan who smelled like ginger and soap. His grandmother. She became his entire world. They lived in a small town outside the city, in a creaking wooden house with ivy growing through the cracks. It wasn't much, but to John, it was a castle. She packed his lunch every morning, kissed his forehead every night, and when he cried quietly into his pillow, she never said a word, only held him until the shaking stopped. She raised him with nothing but her pension and stubborn pride. No matter how tight the budget, he never went to school hungry. He remembered the way she'd peel apples for him during exams, cut into perfect rabbits, just like his mom used to. She never spoke much about his parents, only that they had loved him deeply. That was enough. When she passed away during his first year of college, John stopped speaking for days. He was 19, alone, and hollow. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, just stared at the empty bed where she used to sit and knit during the evenings, the chair still warm when the nurse pulled the blanket up over her still form. After the funeral, he went back to class like a ghost, silent, gray, drifting. That's when Sophia entered his life. He met her at the university library. She was laughing, God, that laugh. It was sunlight on cold skin. She stood in front of the philosophy shelf, arguing with her friend over a line from Camus. Something about absurdity and love. Her words were sharp, but her smile was soft, like she Didn't care whether she was right, only that someone was listening. John hadn't spoken a full sentence in weeks, but when she caught him glancing at her book, she turned and said, "You're quiet, you agree with me, don't you?" He didn't respond, not at first, but when she smiled and waited, actually waited, he finally said, "I think Camus believed love is the absurd." Her eyes lit up like he'd handed her a key. From that moment, they were inseparable. Sophia was everything he wasn't: bright, extroverted, endlessly curious. She could find beauty in chipped coffee mugs, poetry in bus rides, laughter in cheap sandwiches eaten under rainy trees. She pulled him out of the dark like it was second nature. They'd sit on the rooftop of her apartment, legs dangling off the edge, her head against his shoulder. She'd talk for hours while he listened, and somewhere between the moonlight and the way her hand fit into his, John learned to breathe again. At the time, he had nothing to offer her: no car, no money, no connections, just 2 part-time jobs, a failing laptop, and a heart full of silence, but she never seemed to mind. She made jokes about their 5-star dinners of instant noodles and street cart skewers. She'd say, "This is what real love looks like, not diamonds, dumplings." John believed her. He remembered the day he bought her a tiny silver bracelet. It wasn't expensive, barely cost more than his shift at the bookstore, but when he handed it to her on her birthday, she clutched it like it was a rare artifact. "I'll never take it off," she promised. He had memorized that moment. After graduation, life got harder. John threw himself into work: corporate grunt jobs, unpaid internships, late-night coding gigs, anything to build a life worthy of her. He skipped meals, slept at the office, developed migraines from staring at screens too long. But every time he came home to see her, waiting with takeout and a tired smile, it felt worth it. She'd kiss his forehead and say, "You're doing amazing, love, someday we'll have that little cafe we dreamt of." And he'd believe it. Because she believed in him. She was his reason to keep moving. He called her his miracle, the only light that had ever found him in the dark. He used to write her little notes and leave them in her jacket pockets. "You're my whole world. I'd burn out for you. You saved me. I'll spend forever proving you were right to." And maybe that was the problem. He gave her everything. Every hour of sleep, every pulse of effort, every piece of hope he had left after a life full of loss. He built their future in his mind brick by brick: a small house with a garden, weekend markets, maybe a child someday. He didn't need much, just her. Sophia never complained. She praised his hard work, showed him off at company parties, told her friends he was the quiet genius who's going to make it someday. But lately, her tone had changed. She texted less. Cancelled dinner more, always had a meeting, or a friend in town, or a conference. John told himself it was normal. People got busy, relationships matured. Not every moment could be magical, and he was just tired. Tired people overthink. He didn't question it when she stayed out late, or when her perfume changed, or when she stopped wearing the bracelet. Until today. Until the diagnosis. Until the diary. Now every memory felt like a lie told on repeat. He had loved her with the purest part of himself, the orphaned boy who still believed someone could choose him and mean it, and now that boy was dying, and she was already choosing someone else. The apartment door creaked open and the sound of heels clacked softly against the wooden floor. John was still standing where he had been for the last hour, motionless, eyes hollow, Sophia's diary now closed and placed neatly back on the table like nothing had happened, except everything had. He turned toward her, his grip tightened on the wrinkled diagnosis paper still clutched in his palm. Sophia looked up from her phone, barely sparing him a glance, her eyebrows furrowed with something between annoyance and surprise. "Why are you back so early?" The words hit like a slap. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "You look pale." Not, "What's wrong?" Just that, "Why are you back so early?" His throat closed, he couldn't speak. He held out the paper in his hand, not sure which hurt more, the cancer or her indifference. Sophia's eyes skimmed the paper lazily at first, then her expression shifted, but before she could speak, her phone buzzed in her hand. The name on the screen flashed bright: Ryan. She paused, then answered with urgency in her voice John hadn't heard in months. "Hello, Ryan? Wait, what? What happened?" John felt the world narrow again. Sophia gasped, her voice rising. "Oh my God, where are you? The hospital, I'm coming now." She was already grabbing her keys, not even looking at him. As she turned to rush out, she remembered he was still standing there. She blinked, flinched like she'd seen something inconvenient. "Let's talk when I get back," she said quickly, not waiting for a reply. The door slammed shut behind her. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was a free-fall. John didn't know what possessed him to follow her. Maybe it was the pain he couldn't outrun, or the pit in his stomach deeper than the cancer itself. Maybe he just needed to see it for himself, what kind of man she dropped everything for. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and cheap coffee. He moved quietly down the corridor, still in his office clothes, still holding the paper, like it meant anything anymore. He heard her before he saw her. "Oh God, Ryan, please be okay. Please don't scare me like that." John stopped in his tracks. The curtain was drawn around a bed nearby. He could see Sophia's silhouette crouched beside someone. Her voice was wet, broken, hysterical. He stepped closer. "Miss, your boyfriend only fractured a finger," the doctor said, clearly trying not to roll his eyes. "There's no need to cry this much, he'll be just fine." There was a pause, then Sophia's voice came again, awkward and softer. Thank you, doctor." John's hands balled into fists at his sides. He didn't want to be here anymore. He should have left, walked away, gone home, but then he heard it. Ryan's voice. "Thanks, Doc, really appreciate it." A chuckle followed. "She cries like that every time I stub my toe, makes me feel like a prince." The doctor laughed as he walked away. "Marry her soon, son. Girls like that don't come around twice." Then it was quiet. John turned to go, until Ryan's phone rang. He answered casually. "What now? I told you to stop calling me." John froze. "What does your abortion have to do with me? Who even knows if it's mine?" There was a long pause, then Ryan's tone changed, vicious and mocking. "Just die already if you want to. Slept with you a few times and you think you're special? At best, you're KTV material." John's blood turned to ice. He stayed frozen, listening as the call ended. Then a second one came in. Ryan's tone shifted again, slick and desperate. "Ryu, hey, don't worry, I'll get the money. Found a new girl already. She's way hotter than the last one. Just give me a week, yeah?" John stepped forward, yanked the curtain aside. Ryan's eyes widened. "What the hell?" The punch landed square on his jaw. Ryan stumbled back, crashing into the side tray. The monitor beeped wildly. John didn't stop. Another punch, then another. His voice cracked through clenched teeth. "You disgusting bastard!" the nurses shouted from down the hall. A hand grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "John, stop!" It was Sophia. She looked horrified. Papers flew from her handbag, scattering on the hospital floor. John's eyes burned, his chest heaved. She didn't even ask if he was okay. She didn't look at his fists, or the tears gathering in his lashes. She looked at Ryan, and then at John, and said, "Were you following me?" He blinked. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Sophia's voice hardened. "John, we're just dating. You don't get to track where I go. You don't control my life." He felt something crack inside his chest that had nothing to do with cancer. "I wasn't tracking you," he said, his voice low, "but I saw enough." Ryan moaned from the floor, wiping blood from his lip. "You're insane. You just assaulted me." Sophia turned on John again. "Apologize to him." He stared at her, stunned. "What?" She gritted her teeth. "Ryan didn't do anything. You barged in and attacked him like a maniac. Say sorry and pay for the damages before this gets worse." John laughed. It was hollow. Then he said it, slowly. "You're still defending him. Don't twist this, John. I read your diary." Her face paled. "I saw what you wrote. I'm not him, not enough like him. That's why I don't get your tears. That's why you dropped everything for a bruised finger, but couldn't look me in the eye after reading this." He held up the diagnosis paper, torn, wrinkled, drenched in his silent heartbreak. Sophia blinked rapidly. "You're being dramatic." He pointed toward Ryan. "That's who you ran to." Sophia stepped forward, her voice rising. "I told you, Ryan is just my friend." John's tone turned to ice. "Then why do you compare me to him in your diary? Why do you keep saying his name like it me? And's more than mine ever did?" Her face twisted with fury. She slapped him. The sound echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. John didn't flinch. He just stared at her with empty eyes. "I gave you everything," he whispered. "And you were never really mine." Sophia looked away, her shoulders tense, jaw clenched. Ryan, crumpled on the floor, smirked. "Should have picked your battles better, loser." John didn't look at him again. He walked out of the hospital, the cold wind hitting his face like a wall of needles. And for the first time since his diagnosis, he felt the pain of living more than the fear of dying. The night bled into wind and silence. John's shoes scraped the pavement as he wandered, aimless. The city's fluorescent lights blurred into one long, pulsing streak of white and blue. He didn't know how far he had walked from the hospital. He didn't care. The paper in his hand, once so heavy with meaning, was now just a crumpled echo of pain pressed deep into his coat pocket. Every breath burned. His chest ached, not just from the sickness, but from the slap, from the betrayal, from her voice in that hospital corridor like ice cutting through bone. "Ryan is just my friend. Say sorry and pay for the damages. Why are you back so early?" He staggered to the edge of the curb, knees buckling beneath him, body giving up before his heart did. He dropped to the ground, landing hard on the cold concrete. A soft moan escaped his lips as the world tilted and blurred. The edges of the buildings began to sway. His fingers twitched against the sidewalk, reaching out like they were searching for something, anything, to hold on to. And then, everything went black. When he came to, the smell of ginger and warm rice filled the air. The mattress under him was thin but soft. The blanket pulled over his chest felt handmade, patchy but stitched with care. Outside the window, morning sunlight streamed in golden threads, spilling warmth across the wooden floor. A kettle whistled in the distance, then a voice, familiar in cadence, but not in memory. "You're awake, child." He blinked toward the sound. An old woman stood in the doorway holding a steaming bowl. Her hair was tied into a messy gray bun. Her hands looked weathered but strong. And her eyes, those soft brown eyes, held the same look his grandmother once gave him when he came home scraped and crying after school. He tried to sit up. "No, don't strain yourself," she said, quickly setting the bowl down and helping him rest back against his pillow. "You fainted in front of the bus stop. I called the clinic, but they said it was just exhaustion. You need to eat." John opened his mouth to speak, but his voice cracked. Why did you help me?" She smiled gently and sat beside him. "Why wouldn't I? It's too cold for a young man to be sleeping outside alone. You looked like you hadn't eaten in days." "I didn't mean to," he began, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. "No apologies, just soup." He hesitated, then took the bowl and brought the spoon to his lips. It was simple: carrot, ginger, a touch of something sweet, and for some reason, he felt his throat tighten as it went down. Not from the taste, but from the warmth. It had been so long since someone had done something for him without wanting something back. Later that afternoon, after he helped her tidy the kitchen out of habit, she offered to let him stay the night. "There's an extra futon. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean." "I don't have anything to give you," he said quietly. "You're not giving me anything, child. You're resting. That's enough." As he helped her fold clothes, she pointed to a small wooden frame sitting on her shelf. "That's my sister," she said softly. "Lost her years ago. We were close when we were girls." John glanced at the photo and froze. The face, the smile, the shape of her chin. His hand trembled as he pulled out his wallet and removed the tiny, faded photo he'd carried since he was a boy. His grandmother at 19. It was one of the only things left after the fire that destroyed their first home. He held it beside the old woman's frame. They matched, same cheeks, same distant, thoughtful eyes. The old woman's hand rose slowly to her mouth. "Where did you get this?" "She raised me," John whispered. "She was all I had." The old woman blinked rapidly, her eyes wet. "Then your family." They stared at each other in stunned silence before she reached forward and pulled him into an embrace that neither of them had known they needed. After that, everything shifted. He stayed. Day after day. At first because he was too weak to leave, then because he didn't want to. He started helping with small chores, sweeping the porch, repairing the fence, walking beside her as she sold vegetables from her cart down in the village. Everywhere they went, people smiled at her, and eventually, at him too. They began calling him Deborah's boy. Deborah, that was her name. She never asked questions about his past, never pried. She simply fed him, spoke to him kindly, and, more than anything, trusted him. It was the opposite of Sophia. Where Sophia filled silences with sharpness, Deborah let quiet be safe. Where Sophia withdrew when he was weak, Deborah brought him tea and blankets without a word. Where Sophia once told him to fix himself, Deborah hummed lullabies as she handed him warm towels after every fever. He never expected to feel peace again, not after everything. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, he felt his lungs fill for the first time, without guilt. The pain in his stomach still gnawed at him, reminding him of the clock ticking down inside his body. But when Deborah handed him sweet potatoes fresh from the earth, or sat with him in the garden watching the sunset with that knowing, silent smile, he felt like maybe he could hold on just a little longer. Not for Sophia, not for the life he thought he'd have, but for Deborah. For the woman who reminded him of everything real, of where he came from, of who he still was, of what love looked like when it wasn't a transaction, but a quiet act of presence. He wasn't sure how much time he had left, but now, it felt like it could still mean something. He would protect this peace. Even if it was the last thing he ever did. It started with the barking of dogs. John was in the garden, helping Deborah sort through a basket of fresh spinach, when the sound of tires crunching on gravel reached their ears. She looked up, her hands suddenly still. He stood, wiping his palms on his jeans, just as a matte black sedan came to a stop at the front gate. The doors opened, and 3 men stepped out, one of them unmistakable. Ryan. John's jaw tensed. Ryan looked different than before. Gaunter. Eyes more sunken, but still smug, still sharp in the wrong ways. He adjusted the sleeve of his oversized coat like he owned the place. "You're still here," Ryan muttered when he saw John. "Figures." John said nothing. Behind Ryan, a heavy-set man with a tattooed neck spat on the ground. "This the house?" Ryan nodded toward the porch. "Yeah, Grandma's place. Worth enough to cover the debt. Maybe more." John stepped forward. "She's not selling it." Ryan's smirk curled. "Don't remember asking you." Deborah appeared behind John, holding a ladle. Her voice was shaky but firm. "What do you want, Ryan?" Ryan took a few slow steps forward. "I want what's mine, my inheritance. You think I don't know you're hiding cash in this house? Property like this, in your name? You think you can cut me out?" Deborah's fingers clenched the wooden handle. "You're not entitled to anything. You disappeared for years, never visited, never wrote, never called, and now you come back with thugs to take what isn't yours?" "Isn't mine?" Ryan snapped. "I'm your grandson." John turned, staring at Deborah. "Grandson?" Deborah's eyes didn't move from Ryan. "You were raised by me, that's true, but you don't act like family, you never did." The thug stepped onto the porch, cracking his knuckles. "Lady, if you don't want this to get ugly, just sign the deed." John moved fast. He planted himself between Deborah and the thug, his chest rising and falling with steady fury. "You're not touching her." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Back off, John, this doesn't concern you." John didn't move. "Her name is Deborah, not Grandma to you anymore. You gave up that right when you treated her like a bank account." Ryan laughed once. "Still playing knight in shining armor, huh? Sophia fall for that too?" John's voice dropped. "Don't say her name." "Why not? She liked hearing mine." The punch came fast. This time, John didn't hold back. Ryan stumbled into the garden fence, knocking over a basket of vegetables. The thug lunged forward, but John grabbed the metal rake nearby and raised it high. "I said, no one touches her." His voice was calm, dangerous. The man hesitated. "We didn't come here to fight, just to get paid." "You're not getting a single rupee from this house." Ryan wiped his bleeding lip and scoffed. "You really think you can stop me? You think you're somebody here?" Deborah's voice came from behind them, quiet but clear. "He's family." Ryan's head snapped up. She held something in her hand. A photo. Faded, bent at the corners. 2 little girls in school uniforms, standing side by side. One was Deborah. The other was unmistakably John's grandmother. "I didn't realize it until I saw his photo," Deborah whispered. But John, he's my nephew's son. My sister's grandson. Blood. John blinked. Deborah turned to him with trembling hands. I thought I lost them all. But you're hers. For a moment, the world stopped. Even Ryan didn't speak. I never had anyone, John said, voice raw. You do now, Deborah replied softly. And this house, this home, it's yours, not his. Ryan let out a long breath, then looked to his thug. Forget the house, flip it later, let's search for the cash. Before John could react, Ryan shoved past him, charging into the house. Ryan, Deborah cried out. John rushed in after him. Inside, drawers were being yanked open, cushions thrown aside. Ryan was tearing the place apart, desperate. John grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Enough! Ryan struggled. She owes me. You owe her everything. They fell against the shelf, sending porcelain plates crashing to the floor. The thug came inside, grabbing Deborah by the wrist. John turned instantly. Let her go! Ryan kicked John's shin and shoved him back down. Deborah tried to wriggle free. Let me go, let me, the thug backhanded her. The sound cracked the air. John's scream didn't even sound human. He lunged across the room, knocked the man to the floor, fists pounding, rage breaking through every cell in his body. Ryan saw an opening and ran, straight out the back door. By the time the dust settled, the thug was unconscious, Deborah was on the floor sobbing, and Ryan was gone. John called the police. By the time they arrived, Ryan had vanished like smoke. Deborah sat on the porch, a bruise blooming across her cheek. John sat beside her, face in his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I couldn't stop him. You were brave, she said gently. Braver than anyone ever was for me. He looked up. He won't stop, he'll come back. He wants everything. Deborah nodded. Then we need help. But John already knew. This wasn't over. Ryan had taken too many hits. And the next one he delivered would be fatal. The sun had barely begun to rise when John stepped off the last bus into the village. The morning mist clung low to the ground, and the air carried a quiet stillness that made the world feel paused. He adjusted the bag on his shoulder and smiled to himself. Inside was Deborah's favorite herbal candy and a folded letter he had written her the night before. He'd finally signed over the small savings from his final freelance contract to her name. The cancer was spreading faster now, he could feel it. His body, a slow betrayal of everything he still wanted to do, but for once, he felt at peace. He crossed the short bridge to their house, and stopped. The front gate was open, the garden was torn apart, pots shattered, the porch light, usually turned off by Deborah before dawn, still flickered faintly in the fog. He dropped his bag. Deborah? No answer. Deborah! He pushed through the door. Everything inside had been ransacked. Cabinets flung open, drawers yanked out, chairs overturned. The wooden floor was streaked with something dark. His heart began to pound. Deborah? He moved into the kitchen and froze. She lay curled near the back door, her body limp, fingers stained red, her palm still gently closed around something. John dropped to his knees, shaking. No. 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 He reached for her wrist. Cold. Her other hand clutched a small, half-ripe persimmon. One of the last ones from the backyard tree. He had loved them as a boy. She used to save the softest ones for him, patting his back while he ate like it was the best thing in the world. He couldn't breathe. He brushed her hair back gently, his tears silent, the ache in his chest like fire, spreading through every nerve. A shadow shifted behind him. He turned slowly. The village officer stood at the door, pale, out of breath. We got a call, neighbor heard shouting, we think he came back. Ryan escaped custody 3 hours ago during a clinic transfer. John didn't speak. Another officer stepped in, radio in hand. We found him, he said. 2 blocks down, behind the old temple, cornered. John stood up. He didn't remember walking. He didn't remember what the officers were saying. Something about standard procedure, something about identifying the crime scene. He only remembered the cold, and the sound of his own heartbeat. The police had Ryan cuffed when he arrived. He sat against a brick wall, a smug grin stretched across his face despite the dried blood on his temple. "Hey cousin," he said cheerfully. "Sorry about the old bat, she didn't listen, had to shut her up." John stared at him. "I gotta admit," Ryan continued, licking a split lip, "she cried a lot less than Sophia will, you know, when she finds out." John didn't move. Ryan tilted his head. "Find out what?" He grinned wider. "I have AIDS, found out months ago. Didn't bother telling Sophia. Why would I? She wanted to relive her glory days, right? Now she'll relive the end of them too." One of the officers stepped forward. "Watch what you say." But Ryan kept going, leaning forward with venom in his grin. "You're not the only one dying, John. She is too. So what's the point of your little love story now, huh? The grandma's dead, the girl's infected, and you? You were always just a backup character in my life." John stepped forward slowly. "Stop," the officer warned. But John said nothing. His eyes never left Ryan. Ryan snorted. "What, nothing to say now? You're not going to cry again? No hospital meltdowns this time?" John reached into his jacket and pulled out a pair of metal scissors. "Hey!" the officers shouted, but they were too late. One step. Two. John knelt in front of Ryan and whispered, "I was dying anyway." And then, with a motion as calm as breathing, he plunged the scissors into Ryan's chest. The grin disappeared. Ryan gasped, his eyes wide, blood bubbled at his lips as he looked down at the steel buried between his ribs. John twisted the handle. Ryan let out a gargled scream, but John didn't flinch. "I gave you mercy when you mocked me," he said, voice steady. "I gave you silence when you taunted me. I gave you distance when you took her." He leaned in closer, eyes glassy. "But you touched the only person who ever gave me a reason to keep going." Ryan tried to lift his arm, tried to speak, but only blood poured out. John stood, breathing slow and even, and let the scissors fall with a metallic clatter. The officers rushed forward, grabbing him, shouting orders, but none of it registered. He looked up. Across the courtyard, someone had laid a cloth over Deborah's body. The sunlight now illuminated the edge of her shawl, the persimmon still cradled in her cold hand. The officer who had escorted John tried to speak. She must have tried to protect something, held on till the end. John walked over. He knelt beside her and gently took the fruit from her palm. It was bruised, but still sweet. He took a bite. The juice ran down his chin, and for a moment, it was like time rewound. He was 10 again, sitting under the tree, her hand stroking his hair, telling him to chew slowly, to enjoy life. He closed his eyes. So sweet. John didn't resist when they cuffed him. He didn't plead, didn't flinch, didn't even blink when they read him his rights. The officers were quiet, almost reverent. No one wanted to meet his eyes. Maybe it was because of the way he looked, skin pale, cheekbones sharper than weeks prior, hospital bracelet still clinging loosely to his wrist. Or maybe they saw it in his expression, the kind of silence that didn't come from guilt, but completion. He was sentenced within weeks. The footage from the police body camera had captured everything. There was no trial, no arguments, just a judge, a signature, and a metal door closing behind him. But prison wasn't the punishment. It was a waiting room. John's condition worsened rapidly. His weight dropped, his stomach collapsed inward, and the ache spread into his bones like frost. The doctors said the cancer had reached his liver now. It was just a matter of time, maybe a month, maybe 2. He was granted medical parole shortly after. Officer Malik, the same one who'd watched him kneel beside Deborah's body, was there to escort him home. "You sure you want to go back to that place?" Malik asked softly as the car pulled up near the small house on the outskirts. John nodded. The wind greeted him like an old friend as he stepped out. The gate still creaked the same way. The garden had grown wild in his absence, vines tangling around the porch, like the house was trying to shield itself from the world. Inside, everything was quiet. The furniture hadn't moved. Her cup was still on the shelf, the photo of Deborah and her sister still rested by the window. He sank into the old bamboo chair and let the silence surround him. Days passed like a slow unraveling. He no longer ate much, Just sips of soup, bits of soft fruit. Sometimes he stared at the empty chair across from him, half expecting her to shuffle in and scold him for skipping meals. He started writing letters he never mailed, letters to his parents, to his grandmother, to Deborah. He signed each one the same way. "I'll see you soon." Then, one morning, the door knocked. He didn't answer. The knock came again, more urgent. Then it opened. Sophia stepped inside. Her makeup was smudged from crying, her hair wasn't styled, her hands trembled as she clutched the doorframe. "John?" she whispered. He didn't move. She stepped closer. Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say goodbye?" He looked at her the way people look at shadows, recognizing the shape, but no longer needing the presence. She fell to her knees in front of him. "I didn't know what Ryan did. I didn't know who he really was. You were right about everything. I was blind." John's lips curled slightly. "You wrote it." Her brow furrowed. "What?" His voice was colder now. Sharper. Clearer. "John is less and less like him. Should I just break up with him?" She flinched. It wasn't the line, it was the tone. He recited it the way she must have written it, casually, carelessly, without knowing that sentence would carve itself into someone's chest like a blade. "I was sick when I read it," he continued softly. "Not just physically, but deep. You took everything I gave you and still wished I was someone else." "John, I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did." Her lip trembled. "I was confused." He leaned forward slightly. "You should get tested." She went still. His voice remained calm. "You already know why." The room went silent. Her eyes darted left, then right, then back to him. What do you mean?" He didn't answer. She rose to her feet abruptly, as if the air had become poisoned. "Don't say things like that," she whispered. He stared at her. She backed away, shaking her head. "You're just trying to hurt me." "No," he said simply. "I'm trying to leave clean." She stood at the door now, her breath shallow, like she couldn't get enough air. "I didn't know," she stammered. "He never told me." "You told yourself." She said nothing. He leaned his head back against the chair and closed his eyes. "Leave, Sophia." She opened her mouth, then saw something in his expression that silenced her. Not anger, not grief, just finality. She turned and fled, the door slamming behind her. He didn't open his eyes again until the wind moved the curtain beside him. That night, he dreamt. In the dream, the house was warm, filled with light. The wooden floor was freshly polished and the smell of ginger tea drifted through the air. He stepped into the kitchen and saw his grandmother there, laughing softly as she folded dumpling wrappers. "Late again," she teased. Then she turned, and standing beside her was Deborah, wearing her apron, holding a bowl of rice, her face glowing with pride. "We waited for you," she said, and smiled. And then they moved aside. Behind them, at the back of the room, stood his parents. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Their arms were open. He stepped forward, and with every breath, the weight on his chest lifted. He was no longer sick, no longer tired, his skin no longer sagged, and his eyes no longer burned. He was light, he was running, into their arms, into the warmth, into the place he'd never thought he'd find. A home. Not built by someone else's promises, but one that had always waited, silently, patiently, lovingly, for him. As he stepped into the light, he felt it settle in his chest like truth. He was never Sophia's replacement, he was someone's everything.